Welcome, Sherlock. It's a pleasure to have you here. We want to.
Hi.
So, I really wanted to have someone on the channel who is newer to Daoism than me. Honestly, I'm pretty new to it, anyways, but newer than me to kind of get a fresh perspective. Um, what is it for somebody who's just encountering some of these ideas, and what your initial thoughts are? Kind of like a snapshot of your history, so to speak. So, first, I want to ask if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit what is your spiritual and philosophical background before being introduced to Taoism?
Um, well, thank you for hosting me here. It means a lot. And well, not really spiritual background. I'm Jewish in origin, but I wasn't never me or my family never really connected to it. I was an atheist basically from day one. And philosophically, I developed a few years ago my ideology around self-improvement. Mostly like instead of goals that you need to achieve, it's more like continuous chase of the ideal in all directions, just because it's better than chasing pleasures because of a certain logic with reward and the actual journey. It basically um, makes the journey more meaningful instead of just chasing the rewards. And it comes kind of like life improvement while being ethical and attaining several dreams. When I say it like that, it's simple. It's supposed to be simple, but it was like a big deal. I can explain further, though I forgot some of it. But like for me, it kind of what saved me. Like find meaning in my life and direction, because like earlier I just like even as a child was just like, what am I doing here? So
Yeah.
that philosophy I invented just like helped me cope with that.
So that's interesting that you were like, well, let me not just chase pleasures, let me seek some ideals. What inspired you to do that, I guess?
Well, to cope, I suppose, yeah, with like the I understood like the nihilism of it, and just like I didn't wanna like I wanted a direction, and not just the direction society wanted me to take, but an actual meaningful direction for me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think I don't know, that is very different than the perspective that I was raised with and the reasons that I chose the things that I did, but I think it's awesome. Like, I don't know, it's more go getter than I would have done. I think when I started learning about those sort of like nihilism topics for the first time, um, I wasn't as proactive in that as you were.
Well, it's okay. Everybody has a different approach.
Yeah. Well, so that's kind of where you were beforehand. So
Yes.
let me ask you now, how were you first introduced to Taoism?
Well, culturally, like I suppose, like I've there are bits, mixing from here and there. So like I understood like a few concepts, but I never really acknowledged, at least not intentionally, like Taoism, like the philosophy and the religion. I didn't really know anything about that. I just like recognized, spiritual energies, all of that, Tai Chi and all that. Like I understood that because like, the culture and the media, but I didn't really connect it all to like Taoism. Basically what happened is I've pretty much discovered, because as I said before, I'm kind of just like I'm a bit intense. I'm a bit like proactive, and I'm not the one to like let things be or slide. So I just had to keep digging and digging and thinking and thinking and thinking. And eventually I kind of understood that my whole framework and approach to life and fundamental beliefs were all just pretty much worthless in a sense. For at least from the perspective back then, I realized that all the ground that my philosophy and ideologies stood for was just incorrect or impossible to prove, and that every concept that I try to formulate in my mind when in words is just open to interpretation and relativity and subjectivism in such a way that it's impossible to have a concrete ground in anything. And that kind of broke me, because if there is no metaphysical or like epistemological like knowledge truth ground, then morality and like the good life and like utopia, political philosophy, everything. Like I'm the one to act according to my beliefs. I act because I know the why I act and how should I act. And because that was kind of stripped away from me bit by bit and pretty fast, and like in a couple of months, it kind of broke me and like got me like my life wasn't very welcoming, I should say, beforehand, and my philosophy kind of helped me not collapse and not be as depressed. But when that philosophy was taken away from me, because of my reasonings, I couldn't just ignore my revelations, and I had no barrier anymore to support um, the walls of my life, and then I became very depressed. Still am, but
Mm.
improving, happily.
I think that I sympathize a lot with that. It kind of sounds like you're describing an existential crisis. I don't know if that's how you'd frame it.
Well, it's not really that. Like it is, but what happened is I had a bunch of things like don't want to share too much on that,
Sure.
but my life is pretty good, like from a surface level view, like my family, like financial situation, but like for the more like family and like closer stuff and all that, like social and just the way my thinking works, my life was kind of just like triggered like from day one to like be depressed. But because of that philosophy, I was actually kind of happy with my life and just like I had a direction and meaning. So no matter what life threw at me, I was just like, it's all part of the journey. Like it's a setback, but I'll deal with that. It's okay. But then when I had no protection from life, I realized like it kind of it left me with no way to properly protect myself emotionally and psychologically. So my depression like sparked, and once depression is basically like when those feelings and patterns of thought and emotion get so repeated and so intense that they are changing the way your brain is wired. And that makes your way of thinking and your emotional state in just placed into your brain. It's impossible to like a single thought or a single behavior or action or an emotion cannot change that. It's not simply be sad. It's a medical condition because your brain neurotransmitter levels are literally changed because of your past experiences. It's something that is develops and takes time to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
It's not simply feeling sad or feeling existential. It's more like the background level of these feelings is much higher because of how repeated and how intense they are.
I see. So it would be more accurate to say you had certain life experiences that were hurting you, and you had this depression, and you had an existential crisis that made it just worse. Still, more or
Yeah,
less.
that's yeah. So I was at the bottom of the bottom from like my point of view, because like even though again from surface level view my life wasn't that bad. I was in
Right.
a university program, but I just like the depression kind of started affecting my functionality, and I kind of just like became suicidal a bit much,
Yeah.
not a little. But then I found Daoism. That's like it took a bit of big backstory, but well, first of all, I wasn't one to give up easily, so I just tried to recover. I tried to research again. I tried to think again. Tried to like get me out of that pit, spread nihilism and all that. I tried to like I searched some like Friedrich Nietzsche, like the existentialism,
Yeah.
creating my own meaning, and a lot of other philosophies. I created a list of 100 influential philosophers from across time, and I just started watching YouTube videos of their philosophies. I understood what epistemology is, what metaphysics is. Before that, I was very philosophical, but I wasn't interested in researching those topics because, from my point of view, philosophy is just thinking. I just think about things and I develop ideas. I don't really need anybody else's structure or labels to label my philosophy into a certain pattern because it's kind of worthless. I don't really care. It doesn't affect my actions, just how I introduce myself to people. And it doesn't matter that much to me because I was kind of lonely. So it doesn't really matter. But after all that breakdown, I said, screw it, why not? And I started researching philosophy online to start to like understand what I'm going through and like how to get out. I started developing a new philosophical framework under those new revelations. Though it was a very slow and limited process, and I really didn't find um, a lot of the same flow and joy and meaning and direction that I once felt because, as expected, that system was just an ideology and was something that, again, I had no reason to believe it's actually meaningful in any meaningful way. It's just a creation of mine constructed in the words and labels to cope, basically. It doesn't resolve the underlying truth, or should I say dread, that is there. So after a few months of that, I found out Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching, and that was my start in Daoism. I basically started reading and listening to audiobooks and watched a few videos, and I realized that Daoism is a lot deeper than I first seemed on the surface. It seems like go with your instinctual nature and just connect to the organic world around you, and you'll find happiness and flow in the simplicity of life. That's again part of it, but I saw a much deeper insights about truth and epistemology and existentialism. Why should we do anything at all? Why should we live? How can we even, should we live? We are just coping and coping, but is there any reason to cope except our own want to be happy? Is there any meaning to our happiness? All of those questions, and I just understood that Daoism was kind of just there for me. Like instead of needing to create my own structure bit by bit, I started to develop trust in Daoism because it was there, it already existed for thousands of years, and every time I had a crisis, existential crisis and all that, I just came to Daoism, and the Tao Te Ching and other ideas just connected like perfectly. Sometimes not so perfectly, but eventually they did.
Yeah.
And it was just so, I understand that I may be interpreting them in different ways than they intended, but it doesn't really matter because to me it worked, and it really made me trust more and more of Taoism and be more open to the idea of even spiritual Taoism, religious Taoism, though this division is a bit blurry. And yeah, that was my introduction.
That's amazing. One of the reasons I wanted to interview you in particular is because you see it in this way. I, for example, do participate in religious Taoism, do participate in later Taoist traditions like inner cultivation, and I know you have some interest in the cultivation side, but I also know that you're not as interested in the religious side, and very intentionally so. That's one of the reasons I wanted to interview you. In addition to the fact that, like, you know, you're newer to it than me, I wanted to get your perspective on that in particular, like the perspective of what you just explained, that there's a philosophy there that makes sense to you, and that's all that matters. Not the labels, not the structures, none of that. That's me making a statement. To turn that into a question, I've heard you critique like organized religion, like Buddhism, like Daoist religion, like as a religion, and I think you considered organized religion in that way to be kind of a departure from Daoist ideals. And I wondered if you would explain that a little bit more.
Well, thanks for asking. That was interesting. So I think that my take on that is much more open than it was in the past.
Okay.
Simply because I just became more intellectually humble, I suppose. Though saying I'm intellectually humble makes me less humble, I suppose, in certain eyes, but if it's an interview, I suppose. So I just realized that I should be more open. It's kind of just like reminds me of Daoist stories because like um, I was stripped. I became less like I had less philosophy, less ideas. There was a void, and I was then more receptive and more open, and that's the reason I even became desperate and interested enough in order to try Taoist ideas in the first place.
Yeah.
Because usually I would have some beliefs and existing ideologies that would say that no, just no, I don't agree with that. But then I became more like interested because I was receptive, because I had less. There was emptiness, you know. So what happened, and now I'm more open to other religious ideas, but it's especially because of the interpretive side. Just like I did with Taoism, I think that if it's not too costly and it's actually like fun and helpful to get insights from certain texts and religious ideas, then why not? Like, it's my life, and if it helps me and it helps me helps others that I care about, and even though and ones that I care about being helped, even if I don't attach to them specifically, I see it as good because even if the church or the mosque or whatever, like, um, whatever cultural or political figures or like structures will try to hunt me down on that, it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, it's all just words and they mean different things to different people and they have no strict definitions because you define them with other words which are defined using other words, and you can eventually tie that back to some sort of empirical evidence, but that based also on assuming and logic, which then can also be traced back into its own little self. Nothing is really grounded in that sense, and it's part of my. I've come to accept that actually, and it's actually something that makes my life much more actually nicer because instead of being so strict with ideological truth, I became more open to what's actually happening in life and to what others have already done in the past that led things to be, and I became more trusting and open to that because it's just the way it is. It's more helpful to take in what you get and make the best good and insight from that, because in my opinion a man can get enlightened about the universe just from looking at a grain of sand if and only if he's in the right mindset. If he's in a specific crisis and you see the waves on the beach or the leaves on the trees, something clicks and it gives you the inspiration for insight. Regardless, the insight is in you, not in the grain of sand, not in the tree. It's in you. It's two puzzle pieces clicking together. So, in my opinion, to tie back into the question of why I have such a critique to a lot of the organized religions, yet I seek interest in them and in Daoism, is because they are often blind to their own ideas. They are self-contradicting. As I said, I'm not that logical as I once was, but still, it's a part of me, and I would not feel comfortable, particularly agreeing or following ideas that are just illogical in the practical sense. I agree with a lot of paradoxes, especially in Taoism, which are not actually paradoxes. They're just showing you how words are so misleading. They're not actual logical fallacies. But in a lot of those religions, they're just literally saying contradictory things in their own values and theories.
Is it safe to say that your analogy of the grain of sand, you might take some of these religions as being like a grain of sand? You can get enlightenment, or you can get insight perhaps from, looking into it, but the insight isn't actually in the organization of the religion. It isn't even in the words of the scriptures or anything like that. It's in yourself.
Yes, you got that right, yeah. It's mostly the interaction, but the interaction defines me, so yeah, I suppose. So, yeah.
That's awesome. A lot of what you said does very much remind me of certain passages from Daoist texts, for example. It makes me wonder, so what you said in response to this question, and what you said in response to the last question, I'm wondering if I can depart from the questions that I had written down beforehand and ask you kind of a follow up on something I'm noticing. Basically,
Yes, feel free.
so basically, Taoism, it gave you these sort of philosophical answers that you were seeking. It emptied you from, I guess, philosophical errancy, problems that other frameworks were introducing. Taoism helped you remove. That's kind of what I'm gathering. I wondered if you had any like specific examples of like learned this from the Tao Te Ching or from Zhuangzi, and it helped you in this way.
Well, what I did with the Tao Te Ching is I really took that insight interpretation to heart. I started literally digesting the text slowly, line by line, paragraph by paragraph, section by section, and just like trying to put it in my own words, in my own ideas, in a way that still reflects the original meaning. And eventually, as I understood, it made me really digest the text in the sense that it gave me a more practical direction on how to proceed. It gave me a lot of insights because if you just read the text you're just like you're not really processing the data. You're just translating it into mental form. It's just thinking about what you saw, remembering it, but it's not actually digesting the abstracted ideas. So I think my reading and interpretation and contemplation on the text slowly it really helped me, like gave me some insights. Sorry for not giving examples. I know that I
No,
do
that's fine.
that. I'm just a very abstract person. So examples are really not my thing, but I'll try my best.
No, that's okay. If examples aren't your thing and you have a reason for that, understandable. No worries, no need. I think that's clever actually to study the Tao Te Ching in that way, where it doesn't, memorizing the verses and being able to reference them on a whim isn't important to you, because for the same reason that you sought any philosophy at all, what matters is your life. What matters is how is it going to benefit you and make life worth living.
Yeah, that question, I think. You asked me why I think that. I think you know what you mean to ask, but I don't see it in the other questions. Maybe you will ask it, but how the Taoism, my interpretation of it at least, connected to my crisis, because from what I said now, it seems just like I said it happened, but you didn't really explain it. So if you'd like, I can.
Yes,
Though I
I
seem to be talking a
that's
lot, though it to be
that's a good way of putting what I'm trying to ask. Yeah.
Well, you see, for that I will have to explain a bit about my crisis.
Well, only
So
as
as I
much
said
as you're
before-
comfortable and willing to share.
Yeah, I'll try to make it short. Well, my crisis was the lack of. It basically meant that everything is what I call now spirituality. Everything is fluid and gray and about balance and context and interpretation and relativity. Nothing is really in the real sense. If you chase truth in that sense, intellectual truth, if you take that direction and try to dissect life with it, first you get a bunch of tables and more complexity and empiricism and all that, but eventually you will just circle back and return. That's actually a big concept in Daoism, in other thoughts, that I think it just makes me smile every time I realize that, because I've heard a lot of phrases and ideas which children or even like the culture says for thousands of years, and then if you learn a bit and think a bit, they make no sense and they're just stupid and wrong. But then if you continue on that path of thinking and just not give up, not stay in your comfort zone and just keep exploring, eventually we're just gonna reduce and flow back and return to those simplistic and natural ideas because they're just a more comfortable and full to you now than they once were, because they mean something deeper and more grounded to you than they once did.
So same ideas that you once thought were simplistic, but they have new profundity.
Yes, you're really good at putting my prolonged sentences into smaller sentences.
Oh, well, sorry, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm understanding correctly.
No, it wasn't an insult, it was a compliment.
Okay.
So,
That's awesome. I think that explains that. If there's more you wanted to share, we can, or I can move on to the next question.
No, I just wanted to I went off a bit of a tangent. What I meant
Gotcha.
to say is, um, I arrived at what I call the pit at the bottom of philosophy. It's deeper than nihilism. It's not claiming anything. It's the realization. It's not even a truth. It's a realization that there is no ground to intellectually arrive at. What saved me from the idea in Daoism is two ideas which stick out to me, which I could use as examples: the idea of nature and the idea of flow, of Wu Wei. So the first idea, the idea of nature, I think that what saved me is the idea that I don't have to intellectually satisfy the chase, because I already have something that I cannot deny. I can, but it will just create more denial and more conflict. But if I be moderate, I suppose I don't need to justify it all in logical deduction. So I realized that I really have my body and the way it works. And I only have my mind and my thoughts, and my present existence and present reality around me. And that's not nothing. That's no ground. It is exactly everything that I have, and it's more than enough. It's precisely what I need, because it's precisely what I am. There needs to be no permanent intellectual ground, and you can just flow with the nature that you have in the present moment, with your body, with your mind. It just was very liberating, because it allowed me, instead of creative freedom, it just allowed me more peace. Because instead of having the pressure on my shoulder to constantly create and remember, and create more conflict with reality, I instead don't even need to adapt to it. I will just go with what I've been given in this very moment, with my thoughts, with my memories, with my body and my senses, and I'll just learn to flow with that. What I mean by flow is the second concept, is the idea that things have nature, things that they have the way, the essence they're supposed to go. Not supposed to, but they go in. So, for example, you can say physics, in intellectual understanding of the nature, part of it, at least of the nature of things, because it tells you how things behave. And behavior and essence, in my opinion, are very connected. You are what you do, in a sense. Being is a type of doing. So, what I'm trying to say is, what really tortured me in that crisis was the conflict, the internal conflict, and the dread, and the inability to think or say anything coherently, not having any clear direction or meaning. It kind of just tears you apart until you just can't handle the uncertainty and just want to end it, even though you know it's wrong. You know everything is wrong, but you just can't take the dread anymore. Um, so what saved me in this aspect is realizing that I don't have nothing. I have something. I have isness, like the nature, the existence, the heavy reality. Even if I can't confirm the true secrets of it, I still have it. It's still existing and ongoing. And I also know that if you can let things go according to their own independent nature in a way that aligns with it, you can create harmony. And that harmony, which is the fulfillment of your potential and nature, is according to your own personal judgment. Yeah, I know it's a bit of a heavy line, but what it's actually saying is, good life is good, even though it's not a half-half, because life itself has an intrinsic direction towards good. For example, you want to be happy, and that means fulfilling your life will also not promise but supposed to give you happiness. It's part of your goodness is all the things that you deem well. So what I'm trying to say is, it gave me hope that if I can align with the Tao and the nature behind all natures, the nature of how things go in a way that is not friction, it is not conflict, it is not painful or really malicious or corrupted intent, things that go from this depth that I found, this new depth, existential depth, and cosmic glory, you could say, not really glory, greatness. Yeah, if you think about that way, it gave me a hope that I have what I have right now, and not only that, if I can be patient enough and open enough and try enough, eventually I can connect with the Tao and the universe in such a way that I will be able to flow in harmony and fulfill my intended, not really intended by me, but still directed and specialized purpose in this world. And it kind of saved me from that giving up, because it gave me hope, and it gave me direction. It gave me an understanding of how to cope with the new pit I found. I don't need to build a new ladder. I don't need to create a ladder out, because those will always collapse or will just be in denial. Because I was already able to do them, but it's too hard. I don't think I will be able to maintain them. But I realized there is one of those infinite paths out. It is just the natural path, the path that I could be taking, the path that is subjectively, objectively, because those are the same, will be correct and good and fulfilling my meaning and purpose. It will be something that gives me happiness and gives me improvement, and all that really needs to happen will happen if I go down that path. And the crazy thing is, I don't need to construct it, I don't need to discover it. It's already there in every present moment. So I just need to be patient and learn and adapt in order to just flow with it in a certain way that my fulfillment will unfold in a natural way, in a way that it should, and it's better that way than it would, that it needs to or wants to go. So that's what I'm currently doing, and currently it's working, and it's kind of giving me a new understanding. That's the connective part. I could go on though about like other aspects of Taoism. That's like the depth. That's like the real big thing.
The key
Nature
insight.
and flow.
I think it's amazing. I think everything you said is incredibly profound and could be a scripture on its own to inspire generations. Honestly, I think you've taught a great lesson to
Really?
me. I do. I think you taught a great lesson to me. Insights that I had not considered and that are helpful to me. And I'm glad that they were helpful for you.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. I'm glad that I could help.
Yeah, well, consider the example of flow that you gave. Oftentimes, I kind of ignore flow. I just ignore the concept, just because I don't know, I think I over intellectualize a lot of things. And so the idea of flow just doesn't really jive with that in the way that it should. Or the way that I ought to be paying attention to the idea of flow. I don't, because I over intellectualize, and I think you have a really profound insight of what it is and what it means in a way that I've been missing. I'm really glad that we've had this interview, not just to share with other people, but for me myself.
Well, I'm happy that it helped.